Elders. I want to have a little talk about elders, eldership, and why elders are so important in the personal development community. Distinction, I think, between elders and what might be called holders. It just left the elders stepping back rather than being a rich source of knowledge, wisdom, blessing, initiation that they had been previously. Sadly, our modern society seems to completely undervalue eldership. It sees them as obsolete. It doesn't see them as sources of wisdom. In traditional societies, elders were seen as the cornerstone of initiation. They were the cornerstone of guidance. They were legacy building. They were the holders of knowledge. And that seems to have changed. And it changed for two reasons. I don't think it's just young people and our value and our society devalued eldership. I think it's the chain of eldership or kind of that like mentorship of those things got broken somewhere along the line. We know it did. We know there was a massive break during the Industrial Revolution, and suddenly, you know, all that was valued was being able to work. So there you were a man, you were healthy, you was able to work. There you went, off you went. The kids, the children, the boys, they were at home, away from the young men. And the old men and the old women, they were just seen as invaluable. It was even worse for the men, I think, in some ways, because at least elder women were involved in the childcare for a longer period. I mean, that seems to have changed now, sadly. But the elders being the keepers of knowledge, even the keepers of skills, you know, the teachers, that got broken because it wasn't needed. And that lineage of each one teach one, of common wisdom being shared, and need for that sort of common wisdom to be shared was broken. And so suddenly, devoid of that role, you know, it just left the elders stepping back. And as the generations changed, that embedded itself. And I think even older men started to see themselves as useless and having nothing to add to the conversation, rather than being a rich source of knowledge, wisdom, blessing, initiation that they had been previously. And that absence has kind of left a place where many young men are feeling lost because they don't know where to turn to. And so instead of turning to the elders of the community as they would have done, they turn to gurus, influencers. They buy books, they watch podcasts like this. They do all sorts of stuff to try and bridge that gap. And I believe personally, because I was one of these men, I walked around for a long time not realizing that I was looking for the blessing of an older man. I was looking for an older man to take me under his wing. And I know people say, well, that's what dads are for, but it's different. It's different when it's your dad, right? Because they're related to you. And we know what that's like. You don't listen to them. You know, you're so busy I was so busy caught up in the act of rebellion, the act of separation, which is necessary, you know, to separate ourselves from mother or father, that we're rejecting mother and father, yet we're looking for guidance. And we're looking around and the elders ain't there. The elders have been diminished so much that they don't feel they're worthy enough to stand up. So the landscape don't have them. So what do we see? We see other young men, other boys. We get a situation where boys are raising boys. Bell Hooks talks about that a lot in her book, Will to Change. The damage that is done by boys raising boys. And we need men to raise boys. And we need elder men. Because let's face it, it's like that first half of your life's a nightmare. Mine was. I mean, Jung calls it an unavoidable mistake. Like, we have to run around and make mistakes. Of course we have to, because we're having to build the experience to define ourselves by. When we're young, we define ourselves by association, by identity. We look around and we see people like us and we go, right, they're like us, I'm going to join them. That's the values for me. That's the codes for me. That's the customs for me. That's how it all works. We then, make our own mistakes, find out what doesn't work for us, recover certain times if we're lucky, lose people, gain friendships, do some things that work, do some things that don't work. We get to middle age and suddenly we can define ourselves by our experience, by what we've actually lived. It's impossible to define ourselves by experience if we haven't had it. And that's why elders are so important, because they hold the experience. There's someone who we can turn to who goes, do you know a little bit what this is like? Right? And there is a problem with that, right? There is a problem with that in that for longer periods of time, there hadn't been so much change. So, a great-great-grandfather's experience would have been largely the same as their child's. Whereas now a great-great-grandfather's life would be completely different than their child's. So I think often it's seen as like, they don't get the technology, they don't understand the society, it's all moved too fast, of what use can they be? Well, let me tell you something. I think we're more the same than we know. And I've had some conversation with some great elders, very blessed that being part of the Mankind Project. There are some elders there who are incredible, who I've had long conversations with, that has actually brought real tangible clarity to my life, regardless of the fact they might not even know how to use a CD player, let alone fucking whatever handheld device we're using now. So I think eldership is also easy to write off, but we needed them. We needed them then. Traditionally, the role of the elders were to help initiate boys into manhood. It wasn't their peers that done it. It wasn't their fathers that done it. It was the elders of the community came to turn the boys into men. And in that process, they faced the young men to face hardship, to learn responsibility, to step into their roles as providers and protectors. Who's getting them to step into that role now? The media don't want men to be providers and protectors. Well, it doesn't seem like that anyway. I mean, if you put on any program, the man in that, of the father of the house is the laughing stock. Usually, in most comedies, he's the laughing stock. He's not, the role of protector and provider isn't seen as something valuable anymore. Because why? And this is a bigger topic, but I'd like you to question why. Why is it beneficial to have a situation where men are not seen as providers and protectors? Do you think it might be that then not the elders, but those in charge become the protectors, become the providers? That's who we turn to for protection and provision. I'm not sure how healthy that is. I think I'd rather a group of men who have a shared experience within the community that I've lived with, quite frankly, than putting my hands in my life in the hands of a bunch of old Etonians who know nothing about me. But anyway, that's the end of my political broadcast on that. As well as that, they were the storytellers. When we were working through myth, when there wasn't recorded history as much, we needed elders because they'd been there, they'd heard the stories, they knew the songs. And they could also give us their personal experience of things. So they were the holder of knowledge as well as the holder of initiation. Without that, we're now reinventing the wheel all the time. We're often making the same mistakes. We're often falling into the same traps because that knowledge, that common knowledge just isn't there. Also, elders brought accountability. You know, they told the young men, listen, you're acting out. This ain't right. You know, they held them to account. If there was trouble in a small community, the police didn't come in. There was no police force. You know, the kings, they were largely off doing all the mads. Even later, the kings were doing their campaigns, really, in especially rural communities, kind of left on your own. It was up to the elders of the community to come in and bring justice, you know, and call the young man out, get his ego back in place, stop his self-delusion, provide him with the hard-earned insights, and also they blessed. You know, because they held such an important role, the blessing of an elder in those communities really meant something, you know. And then the bit about that is it's not only us missing out, and I say young, us as if I'm one of the younger men. That's how delusional I am. I'm probably an elder actually, but I felt I missed out on having eldership around me. They miss out. The elders miss out. Look what we've done. Look what we do to our old men and old women now. You know, we largely dispose of them. We put them away in homes. We don't even really want to see them, it seems to me. Wouldn't that have been different when we was in an older agricultural, indigenous group, whatever you want to call that, where you become, okay, you can't do the toil anymore. You can't fight the battles. You can't farm the land. But you know the stories. You know the wisdom. You're asked to sort out problems. You know, you're asked to give the blessings. You're asked to perform the customs of those communities. You know, you're seen as the very center of that community. What a place older age would seem. If it was like that, it would be an honor to get there, not a burden. We wouldn't be having to plan, oh God, I don't want to be a burden on my family, because you wouldn't be a burden to your family if we had that system going. You'd be a benefit to the community. And so the absence of all of that, it leads young men being confused and not knowing where the information is, where the stories are, and without blessing. And it leads the older men without a role. And so, as I've said before, in this society where we glorify youth, we need to bring a better balance, and we need to bring that balance within, just as without. You know, everything I'm talking about that we do within the realms of personal development, that we do within personal development communities, we need to do outside. And those elders within the journey of men's personal development are the ones that can hold the information. They've trod that path before. I love hearing the stories from the older guys when they talk about the early days when Robert Bly was coming over and all these people were here. Like, they hold the wisdom. And each time I get an opportunity to work, and I get an opportunity to work with men that I would consider elders in the men's personal development community, some of the main guys, I learn something every time from their wisdom. And so I believe that eldership is an integral part of the men's personal development journey, because that's where we're all going. We're all getting there. And the internal work in that is, and I'm struggling with it at the moment, is trying to teach myself that that's what eldership can be, so I can start looking forward to becoming an elder and taking my place as an elder in the communities that I'm in, rather than trying to cling on to the gorgeousness of youth, you know. And that's a journey that we're all going to take. And what sort of man do you want to be? You know, I don't really want to be the man who's 70-year-old trying to squeeze myself into a Ferrari and chasing 20-year-old girls. It's just not a good look, right? I want to be a man who's comfortable in his eldership and serves that role, helps younger men. I mean, maybe that's what this is. Maybe this is what I'm doing here. Who knows? But I think it's very important that we start moving into a place as we move through our life, being willing to move into mentorship, being willing to move into being more service-based and being of blessing to the communities that we're in, rather than trying to hold on or get rid of. Okay, longer than I thought. It's a hot topic for me because it actually upsets me greatly how invisible older men and older women are in our communities and become. And it's a waste. You know, there's two tragedies, and it's that young men and young women are never told just how powerful they are and how valuable they are until it's too late. They're commodified. And old people are just encouraged to vanish. And whether that's capitalism or whether it's just our society has evolved, it's wrong. And it's severely out of balance. And we have to do something to bring that back into alignment, because that gap in the middle, this edge, the elders need to be speaking to the youngers. I think that's how we get healing. I think that's how we get a stable society. We're spending too much time pointing the finger out there. What is everyone else going to do about this? What's the government going to do about this? What's the politicians going to do about this? What's the entrepreneurs going to do this? How are the scientists going to solve this? And the problem's here. We're the community. We are the ones who can get together and work out anything that we don't like. But we can only do that if we have experience at the heart of it. I'll leave you with that thought. Enjoy yourself, whatever you're doing. And if there is an elder in your life, reach out to them. See how they are and see what you have to learn from them. Okay, stay connected, keep doing the work.